Today we're talking about The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, but instead of just summarizing the book, we're focusing on something deeper, the key inflection points that change Holden Caulfield and reveal who he really is. An inflection point is basically a turning moment, when something shifts emotionally or mentally for a character. Holden might seem like he's just wandering around New York complaining about phonies, but if you look closely, there are several moments where we see major cracks in his tough exterior. Today we're going to walk through 4 major inflection points.
The first moment is Holden leaving Pensy. The second is his lonely night in New York. Third is the museum and his fear of change. Fourth, and finally, the carousel scene with Phoebe. Each of these moments pulls back another layer of Holden's character and helps us understand what he's actually struggling with. And honestly, it's a lot deeper than just teenage angst.
The first major inflection point happens right at the beginning when Holden leaves Pensy Prep. On the surface, it just looks like Holden is being impulsive again, and he's being kicked out of multiple schools, and this just seems like more of the same stuff. But this moment is actually important because it sets the emotional tone for everything that follows. When Holden decides to leave early, it shows his inability to face consequences, his discomfort with goodbyes, and his deep sense of isolation. Instead of staying and finishing things normally, he literally runs away. We also see his famous line about Pensy at the beginning being full of phonies. At first, it sounds like he's being judgmental, but as the story goes on, we realize something important. Holden isn't just criticizing others, he's protecting himself. Calling everyone fake is his defense mechanism. If everyone else is a phony, then he doesn't have to risk getting close to anyone. This moment launches his physical journey to New York, but more importantly, it begins his emotional spiral.
The second major inflection point happens during Holden's first night in New York. This section is full of moments where he tries and fails to connect with people. For example, he hires Sunny, the prostitute, but can't go through with anything. Second, he awkwardly interacts with adults at the bars. And third, he keeps reaching out for connection but never quite gets it. This is important because it exposes a huge contradiction in Holden. He constantly says he hates people, but his actions show that he is desperately lonely.
One of the clearest emotional shifts happens after the situation with Sunny and Maurice. Instead of feeling tough or grown up, Holden ends up feeling small, scared, and depressed. This moment is an inflection point because we start to see Holden is more vulnerable than he pretends, his tough attitude is mostly a front, and he is emotionally overwhelmed by the adult world. New York was supposed to make him feel independent and mature. Instead, it makes him feel even more lost.
The third major inflection point is quieter but extremely important. Holden's thoughts about the Museum of Natural History. When Holden talks about the museum, he says he loves how everything always stays exactly the same. Nothing moves, nothing changes. At first, this might sound like nostalgia, but it actually reveals one of Holden's deepest fears, growing up. Holden is terrified of change. Throughout the book, we see that he struggles with losing his brother Ali, watching kids grow up, and entering adulthood himself. The museum represents the opposite of all of that. It's frozen in time, safe and predictable, but here's the key realization. Holden can't freeze the real world.
This moment is an inflection point because it helps us understand the meaning behind the book's title, The Catcher in the Rye. Holden doesn't just want things to stay the same, he wants to protect innocence, especially children's innocence, which brings us to the most important turning point of it all. The final and biggest inflection point happens in the carousel scene with Phoebe. Up until this moment, Holden has been running away, isolating himself, and emotionally spiraling. But when he watches Phoebe ride the carousel, something shifts. For the first time in the book, Holden stops trying to control everything. He realizes something really important. You can't protect kids from growing up. When Phoebe reaches for the gold ring, even though she might fall, Holden decides to let her try. This is huge. Earlier in the story, Holden fantasizes about being the catcher in the rye, saving children from falling off a cliff into adulthood. But here, he begins to understand. Failing is a part of growing up. And for the first time, Holden actually feels peaceful. He says he feels happy watching Phoebe. This moment shows real emotional growth, even if it's small.
So when people say The Catcher in the Rye is just about a teenager complaining, they're missing the point. Though these key inflection points we see are Holden's real struggle, grief, loneliness, and the fear of changing, and the transition into adulthood. Each turning moment pulls us closer to the truth. Holden isn't just lost, he's hurting. And maybe that's why this book still connects to readers today, because growing up is messy, confusing, and sometimes really lonely.
In the end, Holden never fully figures everything out, but in those small moments, especially at the carousel, we see something important. Not every fall needs to be caught. Sometimes growing up means learning to let go.
Hi, I'm Taylor Suter, and my group's question is, why do teens fear growing up and resisting maturity? When people talk about growing up, I don't think it's about wanting to stay a kid forever. For me, it's deeper than that. I'm an only child. I don't have siblings to share expectations with. I don't have someone else to split the pressure. Everything, the hopes, the dreams, and the pressures, they all weigh on me. Because growing up means there's a possibility I might fail. I might choose the wrong path. I might not reach the level that they imagined me, and I might let them down. When you're young, you don't think about disappointing your parents in the big ways. But as you grow up, decisions to get bigger, careers, relationships, life choices, and the stakes feel higher. So sometimes resisting growing up isn't about being immature, it's about fear. It's about, what if the version of me I become isn't good enough? Teens fear growing up because maturity brings responsibility, and responsibility brings consequences. As a child, mistakes feel smaller. As an adult, they feel permanent. Growing up means expecting that your choices matter.
In The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, Holden is terrified of growing up and constantly avoids responsibility. Reading it made me realize I relate to him. I've been trying to figure out how to start making more decisions on my own instead of always depending on my parents, especially as I get older and closer to real adulthood. Like Holden, I sometimes wish I could just stay in a place where nothing changes. I overthink choices and automatically ask my parents what I should do instead of trusting myself. But I've started pushing myself to make small decisions independently, even if I'm unsure. I'm still scared of growing up, but I'm learning that becoming more independent doesn't mean losing who I am. It just means growing. Something Holden struggles with, but something I know I have to face in my own life.
Hi, I'm Melrose, and I'm going to share a story about how earlier this year, when I was thinking about my upcoming life decisions, what I was going to do with my life, and just I got super overwhelmed with everything in my path going forward. Just like Holden, he doesn't want to grow up and become an adult and lose his innocence. It's kind of like me. A few months ago, I was at the movie theater, and just watching the movie, I zoned out, and I was thinking about like my life, and like just a bunch of things just kept going through my mind, and I just didn't really find an answer on what to do. And since then, I've tried to strengthen my relationships with my family and my friends and really like build a strong foundation to life. And I think I came over my struggle when I started to realize that relationships were the things that helped me most. But Holden was not that way. He never really wanted to have a strong relationship with anyone, which is why he struggled so much. And I think that being able to overcome just trials in life is kind of overcoming your own personal battles within yourself. And just, I really think that we can be like Holden in some ways with kind of trying to overcome our difficulties, but unlike him in some ways also.
The question that we chose to hone in on our TED Talk is, why do teens fear growing up and why do they resist maturity? We thought it would be helpful to relate stories from our own lives to Holden's to help explain why teens in the real world might resist maturity and fear growing up. An explanation for this in my own life is the fact that my grandma has Alzheimer's. This has really had an impact on me because I think that I've always had a fear of growing into someone I don't know, growing into someone who doesn't remember the life ahead of her or the life that she lived. And I think that that is one of the many explanations for why I sometimes really take in all of the childhood that I have and sometimes get scared of what lies ahead of me and what the future holds. And I think that through looking at my grandma and really just seeing that, it has not only like given me this fear that I don't want to turn into someone who doesn't remember her own life, and that's a really scary thing, and that's a big fear I have because of growing up. And additionally, I don't want to have to take on all the responsibilities that may one day lead to all of that. I don't want to take on the responsibilities that my mom has to hold for taking care of her and sort of not really seeing her mother as her mother anymore. And I think those explanations have really like given me this feeling of resisting maturity and just this fear inside me. But additionally, it has also kind of shown me that it is so important to really live in every single moment given to me, never take anything for granted. And I think this can relate back to Holden and how he also resists maturity and fears growing up because of certain aspects that affect him in his own life, and that he's seen with his own eyes that the world is a scary place, but there are ways to overcome that. And
Thank you for watching our TED Talk.